Windows G would have recorded.
Look how beautiful it is. It records, everything's perfect, does it well, doesn't have any problems. David, I want my money back.
Windows G would work.
I would have
Oh
like
yeah.
30 gigs. Sorry, is there an actual question? Was that an actual question?
Oh no. I'm just saying. Sorry, I'm late. I just had trouble with bins.
Connor, you know I would not have noticed. Like, all I get when someone joins is like, "Ba-ding."
Oof.
I don't know. But thank you for joining. Anyway, sorry. Let's go. So I've got the animator. I need the animator. I think y'all know what animators do, and y'all know what animations are, correct? Can someone just confirm that for me?
Yes.
Baz,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Spicy.
Baz, I got a question. Is the last week's class on Classroom just because I missed it because of Corona?
So last week's class, I tried to record with Windows G, and
Oh,
didn't work.
and that definitely worked.
Aha.
I actually tried it with Windows G and with the OBS. So the OBS has audio but no video, and the Windows G has video but no audio. I tried to
Oh
splice them
God,
together,
bro.
but like no, it's a mess. It's not no. So
Wait.
unfortunately, last week's class is not there.
Yeah,
Wait,
because like I
but
missed it. So
Can I
Okay,
ask
so
what is
if
the
anyone's
classroom
missed
code?
or would like a refresh, sorry, Connor, I'll get to you in a sec. If anyone's missed it or would like a refresher, during the tools class, or actually even after this class, I can just redo what I did last week, so people can just see what happened. All right, so it's completely optional.
that
You
would
don't have
be
to
very
go.
nice.
Yeah, I'll do that after this class. Completely optional. But right now I'll just go forward as because everyone else has seen it. If that's okay, David, and then
Of course, yeah, yeah,
yeah, the whole thing's
of
being
course.
recorded. All right, so it should be okay.
Yeah, that's grand. That's grand. I'll watch it again.
Cool. All
But
right, Connor, did
does
you have a
anyone
question?
have the?
oh no, I was just gonna say I'm a video editor, so I could have like spliced the video and audio together.
We
and-
did see his beautiful video.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah.
That's true.
Rules of nature. Yes. Oh.
Connor, I have 8 years of video editing experience.
Oh
What I
right.
don't have is like effort. So
I think I've had like 4. Yeah.
okay,
4.
Jason, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Was it Jason?
Yeah. What's the course code for the classroom for design practice?
Oh, okay. I'll put that up again at the end. Has everyone joined it yet?
Most of us.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put it
Yeah.
up again at the end. Would you just remind me, Jason?
Yeah.
Actually, wait. Let me just see. Game. You should be able to see it on my screen. Design practice. No, that's 2019. Sorry. Design practice. Anyone see it? I'll pop it up at the end. Okay. I'll pop it
Okay.
at the end. All right. Cool.
Thank you.
Anyway, I'll move on from here. So, got the animation ready to animate. So this is the thing that's maybe different from what you've seen. So far, I think you all have seen sprite sheet animation, so you're just putting in sprites. We are going to be doing this bone animation. It does the same thing though. We'll use the animation window. Here are some previous ones I've already made. So if I press play, you should be able to see she's chilling there. That's an idol. Remember that whole thing about secondary animations? So her whole body's moving up and down, but I'm trying to get her hair moving. Like a little bit of head movement as well. And a little bit of arm movement. Not too crazy because it might look ridiculous. Always zoom out if you can. That's a bit annoying with these IK. If I turn off the gizmos, will they show? Oh, that's much better. Don't need the grid. Don't need selection outline. I don't know where to turn off the Anima2D, Bone 2D? No. Okay. Well, we'll deal with this. It's a lot better than it was anyway. So, you want to have all these extra little animations so that from far away it looks okay. And it's a very fine-tuned detail, like how much you want to go. Here is I've got a walk and a run. So here is a walk, and a walk is for slow movement. It's a little too stompy. If I was going to redo it again, she kind of looks like she's like bopping her feet quite hard on the ground. And then I have a run, which is a bit better, I think. That's much better. So whatever you do, whenever you're animating, I always suggest keeping like a floor, knowing where your floor is. So if it helps, you may want to create like, cube, sphere, whatever it is. I think I'm an orthographic view. Doesn't really matter what you're creating. You're just having it there as a reference point, and you could put it there. And that way, whenever you animate, your feet always touch this floor. Okay, because otherwise sometimes you might see where you kind of push the foot down too far or whatever it is, and it looks like it's either floating above the ground or cutting into the ground. You don't want that. So you want to have this level plane. It's not going to form part of the animation. It's just purely there as a reference. So this is going to be called cube reference. Okay, so let's go back to Animator Holder. So I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to create a new clip, and this will be called 2020 idle. Save, and I've just idled. Obviously hit record. I don't know if you had to do this with sprite sheets, but you do need to hit record here. Otherwise, it will not record. You need to remember. So you can see when it goes red, it starts recording. Now, animation, I don't know if you've done this before, but the animation recording capability is really powerful. It can control scale, rotation, position, and also components. So if I had components, I could even animate them. But for this, I just need to care about animating my IK and my bones. So I'm going to do an idle. Let's press play and hopefully you can see this. So that's about 1 second. And it says 1 right here. And that's because I'm doing 60 frames a second. So it will run at about 60 frames a second. I can control that here. But at the moment, it's 1 second, right? An idle usually lasts around 1 second. Depends. If you're like a huge thing, it may be more than 1 second. If you're a small like little mouse or something, you may idle really quickly, but way faster. But let's do 1. So the first thing I want to do is I want to set the first pose for the character, which actually looks pretty good. I might just keep it at this, which is fine. Otherwise, normally I would like move everything to set it into the right kind of like position for, and you can see because I have record on, every time I move something or change anything, where's near arm, it sets something called a keyframe down here, and the keyframe will contain position information because all I did was change position information. Now if I was to do rotation information, let's do it here. Let me just rotate this down. You'll see that I now have both position and rotation information all added automatically, right? So that's a first frame. Now I'm actually not really going to care. Let's leave that. I think it looks fine. So I'm just going to move to 30 because that's 0, 30, 1. I'm choosing 1 as my the length of time, and I can adjust that later, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. And I'm going to put like, let's do the pelvis. Now my personal preference is always work from the pelvis outwards. So let me just show you what I mean. I'm just going to do that. So she's kind of just going to breathe up and down, right? And it should do. And you see the way it's like jerking back up? Jerking back up. And that's because it doesn't have, it only has keyframes until here. So I might just copy these keyframes, which is just Control C. I'll paste some Control V at the end. And if I press play, the pelvis bones go up and down. So you can see now that like this is the kind of idle. It looks dumb because I only have 1 bone working, so it looks really dumb, but it's fine. It's enough to test the timing. And looking at this, it looks like it's too fast. Like Gree is a very relaxed game, it's very chilled. The character is very like elegant and flowy, and this looks way too fast. So what I can do is just grab everything, and you have scrolling wheel, by the way, zooms in and out. I have these little bars, just grab them, pull them out, and that should automatically extend the keyframes. Let's have a look. That's pretty good. Let's extend it a little more. So 2 seconds and play. This should be cool, much better. So you can see she looks more like she's breathing calmly, as opposed to before. Before was like 1 second, which is kind of looks a bit too like, you know, up of like I'm ready to go. It looks like a traditional platformer, a bit too excited. Let's do 2. Cool. So that's fine. So I've done my pelvis, and that's why it's important to do the pelvis first, because then you kind of get the sense of this. So once I've done the pelvis, I just need to do all the secondary animations. So let's do like she bends over. Let's try that. You can do this scrub by clicking up here. You can scrub along the timeline. That looks pretty good. And she goes up, okay. And her head will probably kind of rotate forwards as well. Do I have a little neck? No, I don't. But let's rotate her head like a little forwards. And because her head's going forwards, which way will her hair go? Anyone?
Forwards?
Yes.
No, for the moment, it's falling.
It'll be opposite, right? Because it's a little slower than the actual head. So it's gonna kind of like delay a bit. So let's see if that works. So kind of like that. And later it'll snap back, but I'll worry about that later. I'll show you. Then this is just my method, okay? And I think it's the easiest method, but we'll see. And this one should go down because the head's going down, and this one stays up for a second. Let's see that. Cool. All right. Now later, I will make like this hair kind of bop back up again. But that's later. I'll deal with that later. I just want to deal with first frame, middle frame, last frame for now. Okay, so I've got that. That's fine. Cool. All right, and then let's do the arms. So it's kind of weird when you idle. If you kind of like stand up and out, your hands don't stay in place, right? They stay in place right now because they've got IKs on them. But in real life, they don't stay in place. You kind of like swing your arms a little bit, but it's very subtle. So this is the difficulty. You're trying to make it like swing a little bit. Actually, I probably don't even need to care about the forearm. It's hidden behind the cloak. But let's just do it for the sense of... Okay. It's okay. And let's do the near arm. So... Okay, cool. Alright, so let's see how that looks. And you may notice something right now. So you see that snap? And that's because the
You don't
last
have the back
frames,
frame?
exactly. The last frames haven't had the initial frames copied yet. So let's just do the cloak first of all. So if she's going down, the cloak should kind of like puff up, right? Because like if you think about it, like the air is sort of pushing the cloak up as she's moving down. So let's have the cloak go up a little bit. Let's do that, like so. And now I think every bone has had something happen to it. Okay, and then we just need to copy. I can just click this diamond on top, which selects everything. Control C, go back to here, Control V, and it copies everything. And then if I press play, cool. Right, so it's okay, right? It doesn't look too bad. It's not the worst, but it is a bit unrealistic. So one of the things we mentioned last week is that the timing should overlap. Remember that? So like right now they don't. She goes from like standing up, everything moves at the same time, and then everything goes back to the original. So it's a little bit weird. It's not the worst, but it's a little bit weird. And here's where the trick is much nicer and much easier to deal with. So I just select these two, and this is why you need to fucking remember to name your crop. This is back of hair bone, so these are the back of hair bones position. These two belong to that. I can just push that forwards. So now it's a little bit overlapped. And let's bring it back up, so it rotates back up. Let's see how that works. So it looks a little more, it overlaps a little more, so it doesn't look quite as like ridiculous, and you can just move them away. And I always suggest get everything in the middle right first, and then you can move them away from each other. So that will come down, and then let's let her hair pull back up at the end. Let's see if we move that over here. Let me just look at her hair. Oh, it's a bit too movie. Way too bobbly. So that goes here. Let's reduce the amount. And let's reduce the amount that it pops back up as well. That's back of hair bones here. And this is why it really is important to label what you're doing. So I just want there, much better. It's very subtle, small little movement, but even from far away you kind of get like a little sense of motion. Much better. Okay, cool. And then the same with the cape as well. This is what? Cape, coat bone. This is front coat 2, and front coat 3, which are all these over here. So I grab all of these 3 and just move them forwards and just kind of separate them so they're not all going at the same time. Much better. And we'll do the same with the back as well. So this is coat bone 3. And again, this is so much easier than trying to individually do them. Like just having them all in the same frame and then moving them away from each other, in my opinion, is much easier, personally. Again, just depends. But like, I think this makes much more sense. So now if I press play, you see the way everything is slightly offset, and this hopefully animates much more realistically. In fact, I think it's even still a bit too fast, which is fine, because in Unity I can just grab all of these and just drag them out even further. Let's do like 2.3 and see how that is. Much better. Cool. So that overlap is really important to make it just look more realistic. Okay, so if I don't know how far back I can undo. Come on. Okay, perfect. If I do it here, see the way everything is squishing at the same time? Doesn't quite look that good. And if I redo all the way back to what I completed, that little overlap just makes it look just a little nicer, right? So that's just an idle, all right, which is probably the easiest animation to do. So there's doing animations well, and it does take time. So let's go to, I'm going to do a walk, which is possibly the second hardest one to do. Sorry, the hardest one to do. Let's do 2020 run. Let's do a run so you can see it easier. So again, this is my method of doing a run. I'm going to try for 30 seconds. No, sorry, for 1 second of a run. We'll see how it looks. I can always squish it or extend it. So my method of doing a run, remember to record, is I try to, if we go to look at the animation walk cycles, I like to try this point where it says contact. I like to animate with the first frame starting on contact, because then you can continue to animate the weight, and you should hopefully see what I mean when I do this. So let's set it up in a contact position. So where is leg IK? I'm going to make it as if like the far leg is just about to hit the ground, almost making contact, and the near leg will then be pushing backwards like this. Let's see, like running a bit further like this, and the far leg, let's kind of bend it a bit forward, so just about to hit the ground. Cool, and then that means if the far leg is forwards, that means the near arm is forwards. Isn't that right? Yeah, it's opposite. So the near arm is forwards, and the far arm is backwards, kind of running. And because it's about to hit the ground, the pelvis bone will be kind of like that, just about to, and probably rotate it forwards because she's running, so she's probably aiming a bit forwards. And torso bone also forwards. I'll fix the arms now in a sec. And her head is probably looking forwards because that's where she's running towards. Far arm, this looks fine. And the near arm is probably a bit high up. So if you're unsure how a run cycle looks like, you can also literally just go and search. These are all walk cycles, but you can do a run cycle as well. And you can look at these and kind of see, okay, contact point, the arm should be about 90 degrees, and at the back it should be about whatchamacallit, 135 degrees around. Doesn't have to be perfect, but around that area. And you know that's sort of how it looks like. And in this case, it's a very exaggerated run, so the front leg is almost fully extended. I'm not doing quite as extended, but you know, we can. Let's push it forward, kind of like that. Okay, and then obviously the cloak, that leg is underneath the cloak supposedly, so that cloak needs to also compensate. And this cloak is probably pushing backwards. Oh, no! Walk. No, sorry, this is 2020 run. Recording. Okay, cool. And this cloak is probably just about flipping backwards, sort of like that. Okay, so this my first frame. Hair, don't really care about, like, should be, let's not worry too much about the hair yet. Okay, so this is my major frame. I need to make sure that's copied to the last, so let's go to what's happening. Where is 60? 60, 60, 60. Let's do 30, why not? 30's here, so I'll just copy this, paste that here, and this can just test how long the run cycle. Yeah, it's pretty alright. And all I need to do here at this point, it's going to be exactly the same, so I'll copy it as well and paste it. is exactly the same, except here I'm going to make the arms opposite, right? So the far arm's going to go where the near arm is, and the near arm's going to go where the far arm was. Is that about right? Yeah, about there. A little bit there. And then the legs will swap. So this one's going to go here. And it's going to go there. Is that the right position? And you can add more reference points if you wish. Like you can add another cube here to make sure they hit the exact point. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. So when I press play, it's going to look real dumb. But that's fine. It kind of gives us, it also gives us a sense of the speed. And I'm like, okay, that speed is way too fast. So I'm going to bump that to 50. Cool. Got a sense of speed. Perfect. Okay, cool. So it looks really dumb because it's just the arms moving. But this gives us everything we need to set everything else up. So what I need to have, again, remember, working from the pelvis first. This is hitting the ground. So what happens is I'm going to hit the ground. So my pelvis will probably move forwards a bit. It'll probably rotate forwards a bit. And this leg here, this is the far leg. It's contacting the ground, and if you just think about when you're running, your knee kind of buckles under the weight. It doesn't go up here, but this should be buckling under weight here. So let's look at that. Boom. Perfect. Much better. And we'll deal with it's lifting too fast, but we'll deal with that in a sec. So buckle under the weight. Perfect. That's fine. And this leg here should probably still be leading backwards. So it's still rolling forwards. Perfect. The arms we usually don't need to worry about, although in this case the arm seems to be kind of going weird, but we'll worry about that later. And again, I'm going to do like the torso, the head getting bobbed down, and I'm doing them all in a single frame because later I'll separate them out again, similar to before. Okay, much better. I actually might lift the original pelvis up a little, and that is pelvis bone position, which I then copy and I can paste them in the other ones. Okay, perfect. So I want the pelvis bone to drop down here. Okay. And again, I can just copy these. I do not want to copy the legs, but I can, the legs and the arm. Let's see, so leg I don't want, near leg I don't want, so I want everything else though. Pelvis, head bone, yeah, I want everything else. And I can copy that here. So boop, boop. Okay, doesn't look greatest, but it works. Cool, and then I need to do the legs here as well. So, oh god damn it. So this leg should be still on the ground at this point, because it's just contacted.
You didn't hit record.
No. No. Okay.
Rip.
I just undid, just Control Z, so that should be okay. Let's see, is everything okay? Yeah, it did. Okay, cool. Thanks for that. Oh, good to know people are paying attention. I did that on purpose. Okay, cool. And then the far leg should also kind of lift up. Cool. And you can see I'm slowly making it much more realistic looking. It's still kind of dumb, but it's much better than it was. Let's press play and see. Much better. Cool. Right, now is the time to do the coats. And again, the coat movement is probably going to be the same in this frame as here. So once I do it once, it should just be able to copy over. So I'm going to make the coat kind of puff up a bit when it hits the ground. This part's going to puff up. and this part's gonna kind of like also puff up like that way. Let's see how that works. Bit silly. Maybe in here the coat should be more forward. Yeah, a bit better. Okay, so that is coat bone front coat 3. So we'll copy front coat 3 over to these frames. Is that front coat 3? Oh, rotation, damn it. So I'm copying a rotation over to these. There we go. Cool. So, boop. And I know it's taking ages, and I'm sorry about that, but this stuff does take a lot of time, and getting it right the first time is easier. Cool. Okay. Let's make this one move a little bit as well. Cool. All right. So then it's all the coat stuff. I just need to copy all of that and all of this coat stuff. Control C and Control V right here. So then it should go poof, poof. Cool. Maybe let's move this one back a little bit like that. And that's front coat 1, I think. Rotation. Cool. Bloop, bloop. All right. I think I've hit everything. Let me just double check. Cool. The arms are a bit weird.
Did you get the hair?
Oh, hair. Yeah, shout. Let me just do the arms here. I just want this IK position. That is near arm IK. Okay. And here as well, that would be the far arm IK. Just bring it down. I think she's putting her arm up a bit too high. Cool. Yeah, better. And then the hair. Did I do anything? Oh, I did. I did. It's small, but it's there. I just need to copy the hair because there's no keyframes here for the hair piece. There's no keyframes here for the coat bone. Cool. Okay, so again now once I'm done with this, just make sure to copy the full first frame. Make sure it's exactly the same. What am I missing here? This is the near arm IKs. Oh, they don't change. Okay, cool. Okay, once I'm kind of done, now I can go and move stuff. And again, I can just do this at the same time because they're an exact carbon copy of each other, except that they have, oh shit, miss one. Except that they happen at with just the arms in different positions. So I'm just randomly moving these, so hopefully they don't overlap. And again, I find this method much easier. So let's see what that looks like. Much better. I don't know if you can notice that, but like it looks like everything's overlapping now. It doesn't quite look like everything's happening at the same time. Again, let me undo that so you can see. And if I press play, it's all like pushing at the same time. Why doesn't it loop? Either way, but you can see it happening at the same. And if I redo and overlap everything, much better. Okay, especially if I run it slower. Stuff kind of all. So it looks like her coat is still pushing forward even while her legs are moving back. So everything still has a little bit of a delay. So it doesn't look quite so unrealistic. The last thing I want to do here is with the legs. I just want to do the legs and the hair. So let's check. It's this leg here. Yeah. So that should still be in the ground at this point, even though it's leaving. So I'm just going to add another keyframe here. That should still be in the ground. So now it looks like she's hit the ground and her foot stays in the ground and then kicks off, which looks much better. In fact, We could possibly even keep the foot on the ground all the way until here. So let me undo that last one which I made. And so let's keep the foot on the ground pretty late until about here. So foot's on the ground, then it kicks off, much better. And let's do the same thing. So this is like about almost 2/3 of the way through the animation. I need to do the same thing for the other leg. Here, about 2/3. And again, like I'm very eyebally. Like I know some people will take oh shit, I'm selecting both of them. I know some people will take like actual notes of exactly which frame it is, and you can do that as well. You can go and check. I'm very eyebally personally, but it just depends. And you see the way now it looks like the foot hits the ground and it's like pushing off on the ground like with a lot of weight and just pushing off, as opposed to before it just kind of like touched the ground and left. So now we get like a much more like proper movement, and now it really looks like it's moving correctly. I'm not sure why it's not looping. Do I have the animations looping? I'll sort that in a sec. Do I have another keyframe? Oh, because of this stupid keyframe here. Don't know what this is. Delete. There we go. Wait. Damn it. More keyframes. Okay, I think that should loop now. Much better. And I'm just going to double check that the first frame is exactly the same as the last frame. Yeah, much better. So you can see like it's very small. You can barely see that her foot stays in the ground. You almost can't tell at all. But just that little bit makes it look a lot more like she's pushing off the ground as opposed to just like floating carefully. And now is when, if I want, I can go back in and do like all the little hair bits. So like the hair, rotate it down. Let's see, rotate it up, and I can rotate it back if I want to. I can do all these kind of little bits. And I can tweak that. Copy, paste here. If I want to, and all these secondary animations do make a big difference. But as long as your main animation is fine, it's usually grand. Like once your main animation is good. Okay, so poop. This is the hairpiece bone, position rotation, Control C, Control V. So like, yeah, works fine. Cool. And I'm trying to keep them on the same plane level, so even with the cube gone, when I'm animating, it should look perfectly okay. That should be 2020 run. It should look fine. See, she's still staying in the same bit. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all the animations. Those are the two most difficult ones. Idle and run, especially run, are the two most difficult ones. And then walk is the same as run, just she doesn't, she wouldn't put her foot out as far. The impact wouldn't be as hard. It's very similar. So let me show you the walk that I had before. Here's a walk. And it's just like planting the feet. Just note, it's much clearer where the feet stay in the ground. And everything just doesn't bend over. She's not bent over as much because when you walk, you don't really bend over. It's only when you're running. And then there's the run that I made before, which is a bit better than the one I have now. And you can see I kind of have the like back cape billowing in the wind. The hair moves a bit more. Then we had the idle, which we've already gone over. And this fall is an interesting one. So here's fall. And fall, you want it as a loop, right? Because while it's in the act of falling, you could fall from any height. So you could be at the top of the level, you jump down, and you're falling the whole way. So you don't want it to have like where it hits the ground, has an impact or anything like. It's just a loop. The fall would just be a loop. And I kind of have a stylized fall where one of her legs is forwards. I should probably put one arm back, but it's fine. And what you do then is it'll go from a fall to hit the ground. And if you notice, hit the ground is just one frame, because now we're going to move on to transitions. And what the animator can do is it can transition from the fall looping animation to this one frame of hitting the ground, after which it'll transition directly to idle. And because everything we have is stored as positional and rotational information, Unity can do what's called tweening in between them. So it knows I need to start the arm at this point, and then in idle, it's going to go to this point, so it'll just move them smoothly in between, and we'll see that in a sec. So it's a fall that's looping, again, fall that loops, then it's a 1 frame hit ground, and then it'll just go back to idle then after, and we'll set up the animator to do that. Before I jump into code and animator and all that stuff, any questions on anything that I've shown so far?
I have a quick question. Would it be a different scenario if it was pixel art?
Absolutely. So the main difference in pixel art is you're just putting the sheets, the sprite sheet in there as little sprite frames, obviously, and they're just playing through. Now it
Yeah.
cannot interpolate between frame to frame. So let me see if I can show this here. If I turn on anything, if I go to the animator window, let me just turn off animation for a sec. Window, animator, where are you? Okay, and I'm just going to pull that here so you can see what I'm doing. So hopefully she's doing idle now. She's going to fall, damn it. Let me just put a cube there. Where's my cube gone? Turn off the bottom. I'll just make it a 2D cube for now. Cool. And player code and physics. Just drop the cube down, because otherwise she just fall down because I have gravity on her. Animator, let's press play. Okay, cool. I don't know what's happening. Unity crashed.
Technological University.
Unity, please. Unity, why? I don't know if you can blame TU Dublin for Unity.
We can blame them for the soft or the hardware that they gave you, though.
You can complain about what?
The hardware they gave you, that it isn't good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm running on a 1080, which should be fine. And I've got like a i7. Oh, come on, don't be crashed.
I mean, it's better than my laptop. So like,
I mean, I am recording and streaming and Discord and like having Chrome open as well. So.
Is this on your own personal computer at home, or are you doing it in college?
It's like the work laptop, but the work laptop plugs into like a amplifier at home, so it runs on a 1080 when I'm at home. This just means I need to upgrade to 2080, guys. 2080 Ti. Okay, it actually has crashed. No, please. Please, Unity. Technical difficulties. You have to keep going until it finishes. Like, it's not even taking that much CPU. Like 1 gig of memory, but that's fine. Did it like... I can't even unplay. I can't stop. Oh, no.
Actually, I have a small question about the animator.
Sure. I'm just gonna like kill Unity while you ask that question. Go on, sorry.
Okay, so the question is, let's say you want to have a hand, and you have two different pictures of the hand. Like, let's say you have one from the side and one in the front.
Sprite sheets, is it?
And like, let's say it's in sprite sheet, and you have like one on the front and one on the back, and I could say in the middle of the animation you want to actually swap them. Can you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the eyes on my character as a sprite sheet. The eyes are only childed to the bone. So you can't swap a sprite mesh, but I have it as a child. Let's see if I can open that again. So file, it's open scene, and I want to go to Great Tribute and Great Tribute. Cool. Okay. We still here. So what I can do in this case, I don't actually have the eyes, but what I can do is, so where's the head? Head's here, right? So the head's a sprite mesh. And I can't change the sprite mesh because that's Anima2D stuff. I think with the new Unity animator you will be able to. But either way, what I can do is I'll child an eye to it. Window, animation. This is an idle. Let's just child one of the crappy eyes to it. It's gonna look terrible, but sure. So eyes closed and eyes open, right? Yeah.
I'm sure those eyes have feelings. Don't call them crappy.
I mean, they haven't complained, so
Yeah, so they're already better off. So they're already better people than us.
nah. I'm just gonna put them to the top of the layer. Okay, cool. They're there. You can see them, right? They're small, but
Yeah.
come here. All right, cool. So the eyes closed are there, and let's just put them in a nice place. Okay, cool. So they're childed to the head. So if I go through the animation, boop, they should move in line with the head. No, they're not. They should be childed to the head, and they're not childing. Is that childed to the head? Eyes closed, sprite renderer. Because I did this before and this worked fine. Technical difficulties. Where's my music? Okay.
Baz, do you know what do you know what this means? This just
Oh, let
means
me
we
child
should
to the
actually.
bone. Sorry, let me child to the bone. Sorry, what does this mean?
Oh, we should just get rhythm so we can actually play the technical difficulties music.
Oh. You want to set that up? So I'm going to child that to the head bone. Because it's the head bone that's actually moving, not the sprite mesh. Yay! Okay, so it's childed to the head bone. It's moving and animating because it's just literally just following the head bone. But if I want to do like a blink, let's say, so let's turn on the animation. That's animating. And all I need to do is at this point, where is the eyes closed, eyes open? Let's say at this frame, I'll just drag it in. And it'll go red, and you can see it go from eyes closed to eyes open. See, like so.
Yeah, I see.
So, and that's it. And then I can go back to like eyes closed at this point. So that should like blink open and blinks close. And then let's put that here, eyes open again. And if I press play, there we go, the little blinky. That's all I have
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, so it can be done. However, as I said though, those can't be a sprite mesh. I'm pretty sure. I'm gonna double check right now. I'm pretty sure I can't swap out the sprite mesh at runtime. So let's see if I can swap it out here. Okay, no, it kind of just screws up. So I don't want to do that. I hope I haven't broken anything. No, it's fine. Okay, so I can't do sprite meshes, but if I child a sprite to it, I can do sprites.
Okay.
Coolie bops. Alright, so let's get rid of that eyes closed stuff. Where was I? Oh yeah, animator window. Okay, let's try this again. Fingers crossed this works. Window, animation, animator. Pop the animator to this side. And I just want to press play. Oh no, I need the... It's gonna fall down if I press play, so I need a cube. Or a ground. Actually, I'll just turn on everything else. Because they're all off. Cool, that all works. Yeah, that should be fine. Please, please work. Please. Okay, cool. It's much better. Okay, cool, perfect. So she's there animating, and right now she's playing her default, which is the idle, because that's my default state. Just make sure to select her to make sure this, yeah. So she's playing the idle. So let me just show you what happens after you jump. So what you're going to see is from any state, doesn't matter what state she's in, she can jump. And when she goes to the jump, she's going to go from jump straight to a fall, and then she's going to hit the ground, and then it'll go straight back up into idle. I also have jump to idle, and the reason for that is if you jump onto a platform, I want you to be able to go straight back to idle. So let's just have a look at how that works. I need to be the game window. Oh, I turned off the camera. Damn it. Camera, turn on. Okay, game window. So let's move her up here so you can see better. Jump. See, she's done the fall loop animation. So that's her jump animation, and you can see it happening there. Jump, fall, hit the ground, and it goes right back to idle. It's very quick. And you can see like she does impact the ground, and it's like real fast. So you don't have to have a full looping animation here, because it's just a one frame for hitting the ground. And Unity translates between all of them. These are all different animations, but she smoothly moves in between them because of the parameters that we're setting up in these little arrows. Okay, so I will set this up again from scratch, just so you can all see what I was doing, and then you can have that on your own characters. All good so far?
Yep.
Yep.
Shall we keep
Yeah.
going, or do people need a break? So I know I've just been.
I'm fine to go on.
Everyone okay? Speak now. Forever hold your peace. Okay, cool. Okay, and again, here's another thing. So watch, like, see the way, like, she's trying to animate, but if she doesn't move, she just goes back to idle. And also note, like, here's walking. Oh, it goes a bit too fast to walking. I should have my controller set up. So she kind of goes through walk, but really quickly, and she goes right to run. So it's more if she's slow. There you go. There's a slow movement. But then she goes to run quickly. Right. So I'll set this all up again from scratch. So hopefully you should be able to see how this works and the reason they work. So let's turn this off. So right now I have an come on. So I have an animator. Turn off the main camera. Camera's on. Everything else is on. Okay, cool. So I have an animator there. That's the animator controller. This can be any animator, but in my case, the animator was set up. Animators here, and it's easy to just go there. Cool, there. Here's the animator, and I just set up an animator that has all my transitions within it already. I can start this again from. I don't want to lose them, but sure. I should be able to copy all the animations, I think, into a brand new animator. Let's try that. Create animator controller, and this will be GRI 2020. Yay! It even copied my transitions, which is good. So I don't lose my original one. Okay. So I'm gonna delete all the transitions, and I'll start to create them again from scratch. So this was the original one. Animator controller, and I have my 2021, and I can just replace it in here. So inspector, and now you should use the GRI 2020. Okay, and because they're exact copies, they should, I think, run the same. Let's see. Oh no, they're not set up, because I think this is looking, my code is looking for an animator. Is it? It's not working anyway. Yeah, so now it doesn't work. We need to set it up again. Coolie bops. So that's fine. GRI 2020 is there. Oh, avatar. That's fine. I think that should be okay. And animator, anime script, blah blah. Okay, cool. So let's go GRI 2020. So just delete all of these. And on the animator, I have this code. Sorry, I have the animator there, obviously, but I also have this code here, this animation script. Let's open it and have a look at it. Oh no. Oh, okay, fine, it's opening. Okay, cool. Lol. Kill Visual Studio. What's Visual Studio? Is it called Microsoft Visual Studio? Oh no. Cancel.
I think it was up at the top.
Oh, loading solution projects. No, what are you doing? I don't see it. Where you see it?
It's purple. The purple.
See the
yeah,
Microsoft
sorry,
Visual
purple
Studio?
line.
Yeah, that's it.
Should we give it a chance? No, let's kill it. GTFO.
any problems with John?
Oh. Oh, okay. Come on. That opened a new... Okay, that's much better. I don't know what happened there, but it's fine now. Okay, so I have a bunch of like public variables. There's just a max speed, which is like just maximum speed it'll move at. Jump power is how much power you add when you jump. Acceleration speed, so it'll add acceleration speed until it hits max speed. And we also have like an in-air acceleration speed and an in-air max speed. So this is important because otherwise, if I jumped, I wouldn't be able to control it in midair, which is weird. Like obviously in real life you can't control yourself in midair, but in platformers we're kind of used to doing that. Here's my rigid body. Here's my animator. What I need to know this. So this I need to know. What is my current speed of the character? I need to know my current vertical speed. I need to know where the animator transform is, and there's this like check for am I grounded, and this is important. So you need to check whether the character is on the ground, because you shouldn't be able to jump if the character isn't on the ground. There's multiple ways to do it. You can use raycasts or whatever it is. In my case, I'm using a trigger. So if I go back to the character, you should be able to see on the character there's a capsule. This is for collision, but I also have a little trigger. This trigger here is the ground check. Here, box slider 2D. And this ground check's a trigger, and it ignores the capsule collider of the player. Okay, so my script is fairly simple. When it starts, it's going to find any animators in the children, and it's going to assign them to the anim variable, and it's going to find any rigid bodies on itself, and that's going to be my rigid body. I'm doing fixed update because instead of update, which is it just happens every physics calculation, as it says here. Then I've got my move code. So current speed, it's checking every frame. What's my current speed in the X direction, so horizontal direction. And this is the controller. So it's going to get the input.getAxis. This is just an inbuilt Unity thing. Input.getAxis, for anyone who doesn't know, will get horizontal, because I set it to check horizontal. It'll get any horizontal axis, and that's that's A and D or arrow keys on the keyboard. Or if you plug in a controller, it'll also get the left joystick horizontal movement, just automatically. So that's a nice little Unity thing. And as long as I'm not moving, if my move is greater than 0, it will. This is basically checking if I'm moving left or right, and it's gonna take the animator. So this Yoki Bob, and it's going to set the scale of that to 1 or -1. So basically, if my move is greater than 0, that means I'm moving right, because I'm checking move, and that's my input. So if I press right, the float for move is always 0 to 1 in the right direction. So if it's 1, I'm pressing as hard as I can to the right. If it's -1, I'm pressing as hard as I can to the left. And if I have an analog controller, anything in between is like how hard I'm leaning right or left. Okay, which allows me to do this if I'm moving greater than 0 to the right, then it'll flip the animator so it's -1, because you can see like mine is facing left, so it should flip it -1. Let me just show you that here. Oh shit, ha, lol, I put the wrong axis. Should be X, sorry, -1. And so it'll flip it like that. Okay, and again, this is why it's important to keep the visuals separate from the code. So that's the reason. So mine is facing left, so it'll flip -1 when it goes right, and then conversely, when it's going left, it'll set it back to 1. Does that kind of all make sense? I know it's a bit convoluted. And this just
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, this just means I don't need to animate a right animation and a left animation. I'll just take the entire animator and just flip it left and right. So I just need to do animations in one direction, and I'll flip it for everything else. Way handier. Obviously, if I have like something where the right hand is holding a gun, or a sword or whatever it is, then I probably will need to do animations specifically for left and right, but I'm not going to worry about that for now. This is checking. This should say jump code here. But basically this is checking as long as my current speed is less than the maximum speed, and I'm on the ground, I can add force if I'm pressing. If I'm getting a input axis, I can get like move by acceleration speed, so it's going to give me an acceleration speed. This is the important part for the animator, anim.setFloat. So what you can do is you can tell the animator to set a float, and this is whatever you want to call it. In my case, I'm calling it speed. It will tell the animator there's a float called speed, and the number value for that speed float is this, which is my current speed and a move. Math.absolute will it's called absolute, so math.absolute. That basically sets it as an absolute value. So it doesn't matter whether I'm moving negative or positive, it gives me a full absolute value, right? So -1 is the same as 1 if I put it into mathaf.ibs. That kind of makes sense? Now the reason for that is it says here, it'll check the current speed and output the value as the speed of the animator, so that even if you're pressing move, if I'm just pressing move but the character isn't actually moving, it'll still play the move animation. Then here's my jump code, and that's on vertical axis. You can set it to space as well, doesn't matter. So if I get a space, and as long as I'm not jumping, so my rigid body velocity is less than 0.1 and it's more than -0.1, and I'm on the ground, so it just checks I'm not already jumping or falling and I'm on the ground, then it'll give me add force upwards of whatever my jump power is. Cool. It will also anim.setFloat vertical speed tell the animator at all times, and this updates every frame. It's going to tell the animator what my current vertical speed is, and this is important because if my vertical speed is 0, I know that I'm not jumping and I know that I'm not falling. If my vertical speed is positive, like it's moving upwards, I know that I'm jumping. If my vertical speed is negative, I know that I'm falling. That cool? Any questions so far? Okay. Then the final thing here, this is my ground check, right? So this is the whole thing of like, it's just a double check. I don't technically need a ground check. I can just check whether I'm falling or not falling. And as long as my vertical speed is 0, I can be like, yeah, I'm on the ground. But a ground check kind of solves a lot of problems, so I like having it. And this just goes, if my trigger on trigger stay 2D and whatever the collider, whatever the trigger is in is not a player, then I'm on the ground. So if I'm standing on something and that something is not myself, because if you remember, if I go back to the collider was intersecting, so this trigger here is checking for any colliders and is ignoring the player collider because it's tagged as a player. I'm grounded, and if I'm not grounded, and it's telling that to the animator. So anim.setBool grounded is true. So let's have a look at the animator. If I go to the animator, right now I have 0 parameters, and that's why it wasn't working. This set as layer default state. It should, however, it should already be playing player. So if I press play, it should play player idle. Does it? It is playing player idle. Cool, perfect. Now it won't move and it won't do anything else because there's no other parameters or transitions set up. Like the code's working, so like it's moving, but it's not animating. Cool. So let's have a look back at the code. The parameters I'm telling the animator are grounded. That's a bool, anim.setBool. So it's telling the animator whether I'm grounded or not. I can add that here in parameters. So that's a bool. That's called grounded. And that's true or false. Again, if I press play just to check, that thing should get ticked now. Cool. I'm on the ground. Boop. I'm off the ground. I'm on the ground. Cool. That works. I should also have anim.setFloat speed, and I have anim.setFloat vertical speed, and that's all the parameters I need. Again, I have the code. I'll send you the code. It is as simple as I could make it while working decently. So let's have a look at those two floats. One was speed. It does matter. The caps, it's case sensitive, so it does matter. And then vertical speed is small v, big S. Okay, so that is float, vertical speed. And before I even set up any parameters, let's just check whether this is working. There you go. You see the vertical speed, that's working. It's going positive when I go up, negative when I go down. Goes 0 when I hit the ground. Perfect. Speed, that's it. Remember, I did a mathlf.abs. Mathlf.abs, so it doesn't care whether I'm moving left or right. It always gives me an absolute value. And the reason is I'm flipping the animator already. So the animator doesn't need to care. It's just going to play animation whenever I'm moving at all. And if I move slowly, it'll play walk. And if I move quickly, it'll play run. Right, so it doesn't care. Because all good so far. I'm going to stop here and just check to make sure no one's lost.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
All right.
Fine.
If anyone has an issue, just say now before I move on, because it will get a little more complicated now. I think you guys have seen most of this stuff already, so this shouldn't be the worst. So I have.
Yeah, we did most of this with Nisha.
Perfect. Do I need to cover this then? Am I just be boring you?
Well, I mean, it's nice to get a refresh, but I mean, we've covered the animator and making a character controller and everything. So
Transitions have you covered? Like making sure there's no exit transitions.
yeah, we have.
Explain when to actually have the transition duration, exit time, and all that, and when not to add that in, because I don't really get that.
Cover that. Oh, you don't really get it.
Yeah, I don't, not at all.
I'll do that then.
Always set it to none and 0 and leave it like that.
Okay. So for a sprite, it just set it to 0 because a sprite doesn't have any transitions. It just goes from this frame to that frame. But we do have transitions. Like if I have, if her head is looking up, and then the next animation the head is looking down, I want a transition. I don't want her head to snap straight away. So let me show you what happens without transition. So let's make a transition. I'm just gonna worry about like fuck the walk actually. Let's just delete the walk for now. Let's just do the run. So as soon as make transition, click on this. Oh damn it, inspector. There, cool. So as soon as I condition move, I do need to make sure I'm on the ground. So speed is greater than, let's make it 0.1 just to be safe, because if you make it 0, sometimes Unity will read speed as like 0.00000001, and then it'll play the animation even though you're actually not moving. So let's just do 0.1 to be safe. So it'll do run, and if I go back, transition, speed, grounded goes true, and speed is less than 0.1. It'll play idle. So let's play that just to double check that's working. I haven't done anything yet. Come on, so go. There we go. It's working. If I stop moving, it'll go back. So the reason it slowed down is, I think you all know, because my exit time was on. Exit time meaning it has to play the entire first animation before it allows the second animation. Almost never do you want exit time. So I'm just going to turn off all the exit times. Again, always check. And this should immediately go animate perfect and animate imperfect. So that's much better. So the transition time is this. When I'm moving, you see the way it slowly comes back? By default, the transition time is, if I open that, fixed transition is about 0.25, which usually works pretty well. That's why it's a default. If I set this to 0, it's going to look like ass. So let's set that to 0. Both of those. Press play. It'll snap from one animation to the other. So, boom. See that? Which is kind of crap. Now, with sprite sheets, it doesn't matter because sprite sheets don't have any transitions to go in between. So I can't tween in between, like, her first frame of a run animation and the idle. And depending on the game, like a lot of fighting games, for example, will have the transition time like pretty much 0. Because if you imagine, if I want to punch, I want an instant punch. Because it's a fighting game. I don't want to have any animation frames in between. That's why fighting games are a little different in terms of animation. In this case, though, I'm not a fighting game, quite a relaxed little platforming game, so I definitely want the transition time. So let's set that back, put that back to normal, 0.25 and 0.25, and that will then have a much nicer transition in between. And you can control that number, right? So it doesn't really matter. The default works pretty well, IMO, but in case you want it to like be way more, let's say run to idle will have a much longer transition time. There's two ways I can do it. I can either change it here, or I can just like, grab this and pull that out here. Either way works. So now it should be a much slower from run to idle. Right, so depending how you want to do it, see the way she keeps playing the run for quite a while before idling back. So it really depends on the type of animation you have and the type of game you have. Sometimes I really actually want this. I want this slowdown, like especially in a game where if you imagine that it takes me a long time to slow down, I have a lot of like slide on it, I might want that transition to be quite a lot longer. Again, by default, the usual 0.25 works pretty well. I do need to make sure the exit time is off though. You almost never want exit time on. That's only really ever when you say lock the player, take controls away from the player, and then you put on exit time to make sure the full animation plays before it goes to the next one. So something like cutscenes, or like if I hit the ground and I do like a full like oof animation and get up slowly, but during that time I take control away from the player, that's when you might want to have exit time on to make sure it's there. And then all the rest of the stuff is pretty self-explanatory. So I think you all know any state, which is good. So from any state, I can go to jump as long as I'm grounded false, as long as I'm not on the ground and my vertical speed is higher than, again, I'm going to do 0.1 just to give it a little buffer. It'll go to jump as soon as, oh, sugar. As soon as my vertical speed is, ground is still false, and my vertical speed is less than 0, so I'm falling, 0.1. I'm falling, then as soon as I hit the ground, so grounded is true, and I actually don't even need to care about vertical speed, as soon as I hit the ground, play the hit the ground. I keep forgetting to turn off exit time. You definitely don't want any exit time. And there's no exit time on any state. So it'll play this, and again, ideally go right back to idle. Let's put the idle here so it's a bit clearer. So it'll go no exit time, and as long as I'm grounded and do you know what, just leave it as grounded. This should just work. Boom, cool, done. Goes right back to idle. Great stuff, all set up. And then the only other thing I might want to do is from like jump to idle, I might want to make it able to not have to go through fall, hit ground, and idle in the case where I jump onto a platform and I just want it to like straight away be grounded. I can just have it go directly there. Again, no exit time. And that's it. Very simple. It's very complex to set up, but once I've set it up, the actual parameter itself is only like these few. I have a walk, in which case I could do like right now, as long as it's moving at any speed, it just goes to run. But I can do obviously as long as the speed is greater than 0.1, but the speed is also less than, let's say 4 or something, it'll play walk, and then so this would have to be walk, and then if it was greater again than that, then it would go to run. So that's how you would get kind of different parameters. Now this is the basic simple way of setting up animations. There's much more complex stuff called layers, where we can do layers and we can do blend trees as well. New blend trees. Blend trees are basically, instead of having it like go to walk first and then go to run, I can do like a whole movement tree, and depending on my parameter in the tree, let's create a blend tree. So depending on my speed parameter in here, it would play different animations. I could set it to like, here's the motionless. I can add motion fields, and you can see the thresholds here. So from like 0 to, come on, I need to add animation. Where is it? Walk and run. So walk and player run. So between, don't automate my thresholds. So between 0 to let's say 2, and then after, so like between 2.1 to like, I don't know, 100. Oh damn it, I've got that backwards. 0 to 2.1, and then 2, and then 2.1 to like 100. So it'll go from 0 to 2, it'll play walk, and then from 2.1 to 100, it'll play run. And if I go back to my base layer, I can then just have the transitions go to the blend tree instead. So as soon as my speed is greater than 0.1, it'll go to the blend tree and it'll do whatever the blend tree is telling it to do. Does that kind of make sense? Make transition back and delete these guys. Make transition back, and this is if granted is true and speed is less than 0.1. So fingers crossed this works. Oh no. Oh no. Blend tree no work. Oh, it's working. It's just, oh, exit time. Keep forgetting exit time. Lol. Exit time, exit time. Let's try that now. Cool. There you go. So it's walking, and then she starts doing that. Oh, why is the run going so fast? Oh, what's happening here? Did I screw up in the blend tree? Player run. Threshold 0.2. Compute thresholds. Let's just automate thresholds. Blend type 1D. So speed 0 and 2. I'd have to just tweak the numbers, I think. I just have to tweak these thresholds. Let's do it on the speed. I probably just need to, yeah, just tweak these. Well, let's see if that works. Oh, much better. Cool. So you can do that as well, and that way you can see that in many different types of games. They often have a blend tree for loads of different types of speed. So like if I'm crawling, I might play, if I'm moving really slowly, it might play like a sneaking animation in the blend tree, and if I move a bit faster, it'll play the walk. If I move a bit faster, it'll be like a jog. If I move a bit faster, it'll be a walk. Sorry, a run, and it'll have all of these set into the blend tree. Cool bops. That is pretty much it for today. It's been an hour and a half of you listening to me, so I appreciate that. I hope it's all been useful. I will have the animation script here, and I'll put that up on Classroom, and I'll share the Classroom in the Year 1 Design Practice class, as well as the video YouTube link. I think that's there already. Before we finish up, any other questions?
No.
No? Good stuff. Okay, so for next week, what I was going to do is, because like we can't do in-class stuff and I can't like watch you and look at what you're doing, basically for next week, I'm just going to move ahead and I'm going to assume you all are okay with this. If you have any issues, you can bring them up next week's class. Next week, I'm going to do photo bashing, actually, and I'll show you. It's a very simple technique. It shouldn't be more than an hour, so we should have a pretty short class next week.
What exactly is photo bash?
But you'll find out next week, Connor.
Dun, dun, dun.
Or you can Google it. Like it's pretty. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
Sweet.
Nice.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very